wait for the light, but behold, obscurity for brightness. We walk in darkness. We grope for the wall like the blind, and we grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday as in the night. We are in desolate places as dead men. We roar all like bears and mourn are like doves. We look for judgments, but there is none for salvation. But it is far off from us, for our transgressions are multiplied before thee, and our sins testify against us, for our transgressions are with us.
Hello, good day. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing our study today in the book of Job. I almost said the Gospel of Job, and it almost is a Gospel of Job in a sense, if you've been following along. What hope is there? What hope is there in this unjust world? Let's find out. We're going to just pick it up at 31. Just remembering last time, he talked about how his life had been in the past, what his status in society was, and how that's really changed. Now he's going to swear off all the evil that they would accuse him of. All right, beginning with verse 1. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid? For what portion of God is there from above? And what inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Is not destruction to the wicked, and a strange punishment to the workers of iniquity? Doth not he see my ways, and count all my steps? If I have walked with vanity, or if my foot hath hasted to deceit, let me be weighed in an even balance, that God may know mine integrity. If my step have turned out of the way, and mine heart walked after mine eyes, and if any blot have cleaved to my hands, then let me sow, and another eat. Yea, let my offspring be rooted out. If mine heart hath been deceived by a woman, or if I have laid wait at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind to another, and let others bow down upon her. For this is an heinous crime. Yea, it is an iniquity to be punished by the judges. For it is a fire that consumeth to destruction, and would root out all mine increase, if I did despise the cause of my manservant or of my maidservant when they contended with me. What then shall I do when God riseth up? And when he visiteth, what shall I answer him? Did not he that made me in the womb make him? And did not one fashion us in the womb? If I have withheld the poor from their desire, or have caused the eyes of the widow to fail, or have eaten my morsel of myself alone, and the fatherless have not eaten thereof, for from my youth he was brought up with me, as with a father, and I have guided him from my mother's womb. Her. I think he's referring there to his maidservant and manservants, by the way. If I have seen any perish for want of clothing, or any poor without covering, if his loins have not blessed me, and if he were not warmed by the fleece of my sheep, if I have lifted up mine hand against the fatherless, when I saw my help in the gate, then let mine arm fall from my shoulder blade, and mine arm be broken from the bone. For destruction from God was a terror to me, and by reason of his highness I could not endure. If I have made gold my hope, or have said to find gold, thou art my confidence. If I rejoiced because my wealth was great, and because mine hand hath gotten much, if I beheld the sun when it shined, or the moon walking in brightness, and my heart hath been secretly enticed, or my mouth hath kissed my hand, This also were an iniquity, to be punished by the judge. For I should have denied the God that is above. If I rejoiced at the destruction of him that hated me, or lifted up myself when evil found him, neither have I suffered my mouth to sin by wishing a curse to his soul. If the men of my tabernacle said not, oh, that we had of his flesh, we cannot be satisfied. The stranger did not lodge in the street, but I opened my door to the travelers. Got it backwards. My doors to the traveler. If I covered my transgressions as Adam, by hiding mine iniquity in my bosom, did I fear a great multitude? Or did the contempt of families terrify me, that I kept silence and went not out the door? Oh, that one would hear me. Behold, my desire is that the Almighty would answer me, and that mine adversary had written a book. Surely I would take it upon my shoulder and bind it as a crown to me. I would declare unto him the number of my steps. As a price would I go near unto him. If my land cry against me, or that the furrows likewise thereof complain, if I have eaten the fruits thereof without money, or have caused the owners thereof to lose their life, let thistles grow instead of wheat, and a cockle instead of barley. The words of Job are ended, for the most part. He does respond to God, in a way. So the three men ceased to answer Job, and then this Elihu, the young one, the youth of the group, he comes and has his little say, but he's also wrong. Because again, the truth is God doesn't really need justification, and that's the problem. Is they think, because they think God has to have a reason to do this. Job is saying he's righteous and God has done this to him. He's accusing God of doing something wrong. That's what they're accusing God of doing something wrong. Job has accused God of nothing other than that he did this to him, but he's not saying it's wrong. He's just saying he doesn't deserve it. I mean, he's not accusing God of doing anything wrong. Just that God has done with him according to his will, which was not, hold on a second. I gotta mute this a second. So there's a lot of interesting things here, as I was saying. Oop. I noticed a couple verses, I was like, hey. When he talks about his manservants and maidservants, he says, didn't God form both of us in the womb? Yeah, that's all men are created equal. Right there. Like when it says, where was it? I forgot which verse. We'll go through it. Yeah, but there were several verses like that jump me out. Oh, that's a concept that you find elsewhere. Oh, this is what I'm like finding. It's Elihu's speech. Here we go. That'll be easy to find. Oh, where's my maidservant? Oh, let's just go through it verse by verse. There was also one early. So, let's see. I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I look upon a maid? I remember this was portrayed in a book on sexual addiction as a possible method of dealing with lust. Make some sort of covenant with your eyes. And again, I think Job again is speaking in a lot of symbolic language. I don't think he literally made a covenant with his eyes. He's just saying it means there is a sort of a nearly formal arrangement. I mean, if you want to believe it was literal, then go ahead. But whatever. I'm just saying it could also be just like, the way we live our lives could be viewed in a sort of covenantal way. Because when you serve God and you understand that, you know that you have to, that it is expected of us that we should walk in his ways. And not that he isn't, mindful of our frame, and I say that all the time, okay. There's room to make mistakes, but not room to mock God. That's the chief difference. There's room to make mistakes, plenty of room to make mistakes. Lots of room. Look at Peter made a mistake, but pretty big mistakes too. That's good to know. But not with the thought, that is a temptation towards God or in mockery of him, like Ananias and Sapphira or Judas Iscariot. It went too far. And if we mock God like that, it renders our faith of none effect, because it manifests an evil heart of unbelief, really. Because if you really believed in God, you wouldn't mock him, because that's foolish. Why then should I think upon a maid? Why should I think about young ladies? And he's just citing that as a kind of wickedness. But also, I think he's citing it also is because it is, like Jesus said, in his time, the Pharisees, one of the biggest disputes Jesus and John the Baptist had with the Jews of their days was as to the sinfulness of divorce. And they maintained, and many Talmudic Jews still maintain, that a man may divorce his wife for any reason. Even any reason, even one such as, I find this other woman more attractive. And Jesus said, no, that's wicked. That's wickedness. That's adultery. That's just adultery. And you're using the fact that Moses gave permission for divorces. People will say, well, why do that? Because if you don't let people divorce each other, they'll kill each other. If there's no way out, there has to be some sort of pressure release. Divorce is not good. God's against it. Same thing with, and I've used this before many times. I think it's actually, I want to call it brilliant, but I don't like saying anything I do is brilliant. But it is a very clever defense of slavery. Because slavery is also an evil. But if you read the text of the Old Testament carefully, you see that it's a very highly regulated form of slavery that the law of Moses institutes. It's not like chattel slavery in antebellum Southern America. It's just nothing like it. Just compare the fugitive slave law, as I've many times referred to. You weren't allowed to return fugitive slaves because they had the presumption of they ran away. Why would they run away? Probably because you're doing something wrong. Usually slaves would stick around and take their meals and work off their debts. Because that's the purpose of the biblical permission for that, because it was part of the thing. They need some sort of out. If you can't pay your debts, what do? They're going to kill you. Well, maybe you just pay them off the hard way. And I could go through that, but that's not the topic right here, okay? I'm going to do a special study someday on that one, because I think it's good, because people always talk about, the Bible condones slavery. Again, does the Bible condone divorce? You could argue that, but Jesus would say, no, it's for the hardness of men's hearts. We have divorce and adultery. We have laws that govern divorce and laws that govern things like slavery, both very, I call them necessary evils. Because though we don't have chattel slavery anymore, we all have our little bondages. Sometimes you get in debt, and you might as well be a slave because you're not working for your own welfare. You're working to pay off them and their interest. You're making them rich. Debt slavery is not quite as bad as chattel slavery, but it is a kind of slavery. And certainly it's the biblical kind. So, if you're enslaved to debt, you're enslaved in the biblical way. So why should I think upon a maid? I wonder what it says in the NIV, just out of curiosity, because I'm like, is that a good interpretation? It seems pretty close. Yeah, they add lustfully. I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. They added the lustfully because they don't think you're very bright. But he does say think, because that's why they say look lustfully. Because he also talked about if my mind, or my, he didn't say brain, but if my thoughts or whatever he said, I forget how he put it. But basically, if my mind had taken in what my eyes had seen, if my mind had embraced the evil, because we all encounter temptation. Oh, whatever, I'm going to have to go through it one by one. Oh, yeah. Well, this is a different one. I like this when he says, or my mouth had kissed my hand. I think that's the same as patting yourself on the back. All right, we're going to get to that. I just liked all those interesting things like that, because I'm like, that's how, if mouth kissing my hand, you're like, mwah. Sounds like patting yourself on the back, right? Right. I think that's pretty much what that, it's an old idiom. They don't, kiss your hand. Because it's my hand. Oh, look what my hand did. Good job, Paul. Good job. That same kind of spirit, I think, huh? We'll see what the NIV does with that. Maybe they go ahead and just interpret the idiom for you because they don't want you to be confused. And it's fine for casual reading. Okay, I like people to come up a little higher, to do a little more investigation. At least if you're really interested in the Bible, there should be, there's nothing wrong with good, easy to access translations for casual reading. But for deep study, they're kind of, they can lead you into, they rob you of a little bit of the richness of the Scripture. That's what I would say. A little of that richness is lost. I think, and I don't think anyone who seriously considers those subjects would disagree. They may disagree and say, no, nothing's acceptable except the King James. But people who like the NIV, they might say, yeah, when you compare the two, there is a loss. Like, you don't get to interpret. They do it for you. You still get to interpret. I just mean things like idioms and metaphors are often just laid out in a very plain way. For what is our lot from God above, our heritage from the Almighty on high? So he's saying the heritage for being lustful and to do the wicked things. And of course, what is the heritage of the Most High? It is ruin for the wicked. Or what does it say? Destruction of the wicked. What was strange punishment in the NIV? Let's take a look. Well, I realized I never brought that up before. That's okay. All right. I need to go. They say disaster instead of strange punishment. Oh, the word punishment is not there. It's strange, nikar, something strange to the workers of iniquity. Well, it means something foreign or strange, alien, unfamiliar. So an unusual, it implies, see, that's why they say disaster, because it is an unusual or unexpected, a foreign, like when they're like, wow, Florida's never had snow like this, or, something that just seems totally foreign, or Texas getting super cold, in the middle of winter that they're not used to, and they're not prepared for it. Like up here, we're used to, in Illinois, we're used to boiling in the summer and freezing in the winter, so it just doesn't matter. Kind of ready for everything. It just doesn't get too hot or too cold. All right, something foreign, unfamiliar. Again, I get it. I think the King James did a strange punishment. Something, something out of the ordinary. Thing, unexpected. I think that the unexpected thing, because the workers of iniquity don't expect punishment. That's why they work iniquity. If they expected punishment, they would not do it. If you were immediately punished after every episode of wrongdoing, like if God immediately gave you a slap on the bottom, you might learn real fast to stop it. But that's not how it goes. We're going to learn it the hard way. Why? It's like, well, God, apparently he decided this was the way he wanted to do it. I don't like it. It's fine. No one asked you. Sorry. Some days I don't like it either. And some days Jesus didn't like it much either. Let me tell you that. Okay, he wanted it to be some other way too. But you know what? Sometimes it's just the way the Father wants. It's not, that's a bit what Job is about. A lot of people who are secular don't believe, they hate Job. They don't like the book. And a lot of Christians don't like Job either for some reason. Though the more I study, I'm like, I get it. I think it's mostly they don't trust people to be able to handle hearing people make different arguments, and Job's ambivalence, and we can't be ambivalent and not certain about our fate. We have to know. Do you know what's going to happen after you die? Do you know that if you died tonight, what would happen to your soul? We're all about that. And telling people that, it's some sort of formula of things you think up here. To some degree, yes, that is, but I mean, truthfully, the things you think up here, that is actually a result of God's grace and mercy, God revealing it to you. When you start having the right things happening up here, that is salvation, because God in his mercy has reached out to you. And the evidence that it is truly God and not just something else, like, when you see people who go into the church and they go out from us because they are not of us, they're partly part of it, like Ananias and Sapphira, like Judas. Haven't I chosen you 12 and one is a devil? And these things go on. I forgot what I was getting at. Well, God allows them, and it's part of his plan. And we don't understand, and we would like it to be different, but we're thinking mostly in terms of our own pleasure and leisure, whereas God has his own goals in mind. And so, and like I said, since he has the ability to make it all work out in the end, it doesn't, as long as he does follow through on that, there's really no reason to criticize. You have to trust. He didn't bring this world into being just because he's a cruel and capricious God that just desires nothing more than human suffering. But some people act as though that's the world we live in. It's obviously not the world we live in. They talk about the problem of evil, and I've talked about this before. What about the problem of good? Why is there so much good in this world? Why would there be so much? There shouldn't be this much good. Evil's not the big problem. The big problem is good. That's the problem for the atheists. How do you deal with all the wonderful good things? It's not just amazing and complex, which should be a wonder, but they're all, we can, we're so, here's the thing. We are so used to the complexity of life and stuff. We take it for granted. We do. We take it for granted. And so many humans just take everything for granted. And that's kind of what God wants. So we go out and just be ourselves. Myself is not the greatest person. It's like, thank God that he has intervened in my life to make amendments to my character. This is something we participate with God in, something we ought to. Because he does see our ways. He counts all our steps. Now, we've passed from death to life in Christ Jesus. It's not a question of earning your way into heaven by any means. But having entered into a relationship with God, he is there to instruct you in the ways of righteousness. And, if you are defiant of that for your entire life, that could be a problem. But if, we all come, I didn't know this all the time. I just thought it was just like, hey, whatever I think, I just got to be on Team Jesus. And it's like when you think back to the Jews, that's what they thought in the first century. Oh, we're the Jews. It's our identity. Now we think, it's just what we think. That's our identity. It's not about identity. That's one of the most clear things from the New Testament. God is no respecter of persons, especially not like that. But in every nation, him that does righteousness and fears him is received of him. That was Peter's big revelation. And that's important. It's not just about that the Gentiles are unclean. It's just that, he said, I should call no man unclean. He hadn't preached to him yet. He just saw that what Christ would do with people, they didn't have to come from the same place Peter did. They didn't have to. It's a big point in the New Testament. And of Job, because it's like Job definitely knows about Adam. It's not obvious that he knows about Moses. It's not obvious. He very well may. But it's not a very legal document, and I haven't looked into what other scholars have done as far as they may. Some scholars will suss out actual references to the Pentateuch. I mean, like the reference to Adam, of course, is a reference to the Pentateuch. Correct. But I mean to the books of the law. There would be more Mosaic. Because Genesis, honestly, is the least Mosaic of the first 5 books called the books of Moses. In the sense that the Exodus actually deals with Moses' life, has a lot of law in it. Moses was the lawgiver. And Genesis is not a big law book. It's more like a record of Abraham's life and the world before Abraham, which Moses may have had by revelation, but the book itself is not very Mosaic in character. And I don't even think it was given to Moses like that. I think the Hebrews knew about this either by oral tradition or quite possibly written tradition. That's why I always reject the idea that Peter was, all the apostles were illiterate. Why? The Pharisees went around promoting literacy among the Jews. The Jews in ancient times, just like today, they push education a little harder. Especially back then, it was like a thing. Because they didn't want God to cast them out of the land again. So they're very careful to teach everyone the Bible. And Jesus, of course, he was a carpenter's son, but he was able to get up in the synagogue and read. And I don't think that was a miracle. It was, not that he couldn't have as a miracle, but I'm just saying I don't think that was a miracle. It wasn't supposed to be like, this man can read. Well, they said at one point, how do these men do this, knowing not letters? That's not necessarily illiterate. Illiterate can be an insult that's not literally true. Like someone could easily, it's just like today we say, you're not an expert. But do I have to be? They populate juries with non-experts all the time. You know what I mean? You notice that? They have expert testimonies. Then they have a bunch of jamokes decide if those experts are right. But I think that's exactly right. I'm a jamoke, but I can still tell an expert if he's full of you-know-what. Not just because I know it all. What I'm saying is, let's say you get two experts and two experts talking and they don't agree. Well, who's going to decide? The way the government does it, the government decides. It's not a jury of your peers. I'd prefer that, but even then I don't trust it. It's easy to manipulate juries. But I'm just saying, we have average people judge the testimony of experts every day in America. The testimony of experts is subject to the scrutiny of normal men. I'm educated too. I don't have to be an expert in everything to listen to an expert and then listen to another expert and decide on which one I think is more credible. Maybe some people can't do that, but I and many of you probably can. I guess it's annoying to me because everybody thinks, these high and mighty people who think they want to lord it over everybody. My goal is to make you a lord under Jesus, of course, but that's his goal too, is to make you like a son, make you sit down with him in his throne, to put a crown on your head. But the crown doesn't go on fools. You got to come along. Come along for the ride. Learn of Jesus. Doesn't he see me? Count all my steps. Yeah, God sees us, of course. If I have walked with vanity, if my foot hath hasted to deceit. Again, these are sort of, walked with, what does that mean? Walked with vanity? It means I lived out my life and there was vanity intertwined in it. It was, part of my life. My foot hasted to deceit. Everyone's foot might slip, but you shouldn't go running off to do evil. And the foot that's the thing which carries you off to do things, rushing off. My foot. As if the foot is, has agency. It doesn't, but that's the point. That's not the point, but that's poetic. That's not the point. Let me be weighed in an even balance. He's saying, just be fair with me, that God may know my integrity. I don't think he's saying that any of these things are true. He's just saying, I'm willing to be judged on the basis of all these things. If my step have turned out, he's just trusting, if it's fair, I'm going to be fine. He becomes more confident as it goes too, because he's like, I'm not going to let you guys be right. But if my step have turned out of the way of God, the right way, the true way, the truth, and the life, which is Jesus Christ, mine heart have walked after mine eyes. There it was. If my heart have walked after mine eyes. That's like I talked about, I should not think upon a maid. You're going to see things in life. It's impossible to go through life without seeing things. I told my wife many times, it's like, yeah, I know the young girls shouldn't wear clothes that expose themselves, but in our society, a bikini is rated G. unless it's really small. Even then, I think it's pretty much rated G. You can have a beach scene in a G-rated movie, and it doesn't change a thing. Right? Even though it is kind of, it can be, because I've talked, when I was talking to someone, I'm like, when I was young, I was looking for dirty magazines, for pornography. And I come up with lingerie catalogs and stuff like that, right? Swimsuit magazines. Swimsuit's different. Well, some of them more different. It depends. Because in a lot of those lingerie catalogs, they're not trying to provoke men. It's trying to show women they're something they might like to buy, right? And so they don't look like they're all like, come hither. They don't have all these expressions on their face like, ooh, big boy. Like in the dirty magazines where it's explicitly sexual. What I'm saying is, though, but you can sexualize those images, even because they are wearing lingerie and stuff. So you can, what I mean? So you might see something like that, lingerie or bathing suit, or even just a pretty woman in general. But the key is, seeing it is not the sin. It's when your heart walks after your eyes. You allow your heart to then begin contemplating it. It's because that which goes into a man doesn't defile him unless it goes into his heart. Those things that go into the heart and come back out, because it's not the seeing of the woman that goes in your heart. It's the lust that comes out of your heart that's really the sin. And if any blot hath cleaved to my hands, a speck, a blot, it's symbolic. Any kind of blot, like a mark, a stain. It's like when someone does, like, let's say, like Sherlock Holmes, like, oh, he's got ink stains on his fingers, he's guilty, or oh, he's got scratch marks all over his hands from when the victim was fighting him off. There's evidence. If any blot, like blood, like I've done something wrong, and my hands are marked. Men can't see it, but God can see it. Because that's the thing, is like things cling to you, whether you like it or not. You don't just walk away. Sins must be dealt with. You got to come to God with your sins and be reconciled. That's why we come to Jesus. So our sins may be reconciled, and we trust that they are. Then we go walk in newness of life, putting the things of the past behind us. I don't want to try to get too, we don't want to mock God. We don't want to tempt Christ. But also we have to give ourselves enough. We're human. And he understands our frame, and especially not ourselves so much. Well, you don't want to be so strict on yourself that it becomes unhealthy and you can't do anything because you feel so down about your own lack of progress or achievement or moral rectitude. You feel like you don't measure up. Now, you don't want to just dismiss that as well, who cares? It doesn't. My sins don't matter. Well, they do. You're not going to go to hell over them, but it's the sort of thing God would want you to work on. That's why you're noticing it. He wants. There's growth to be had there. You got to see it as an opportunity. Because overcoming sin it's a great blessing to be able to strongly confront a temptation and send it off, and not have it enter into my heart and cause my heart to walk after the temptation that I know I shouldn't follow. Right? And if the blot cleaves to my hands, again, that's the idea of I've sinned and I haven't, there's no forgiveness. I haven't restored what I took. I haven't, or I did something that can't be reconciled or whatever. Well, if that's the case, then let me sow and another eat. That's one of the things it talks about, and I think is one of the axioms of heaven. They will enjoy the fruit of their labor. They will build houses and inhabit them. They will plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. And I think that's symbolic of that sort of just general idea of productive work that is not undone by evil. And that sounds great. Like I said, the fact, see, one of the things growing up, every kid or a lot of kids have said, right, why make the bed? It's just going to get messed up again, right? Why make the bed? It's just going to get messed up again. And it's funny because people will say, well, eternity will be boring. And why? How does that relate? Well, because it's there's a reason. In eternity, there is a reason to make the bed. because it's not going to get messed up again. Yeah, I mean, so to speak. Meaning, again, it's probably a bad analogy because he's like, "Why aren't you going to go to sleep?" Well, you won't have to. But the point is, it's like, no. When you put something in order, entropy does not have to destroy it. In this world, I fix things and then they fall apart. And it happens over and over again. It's very frustrating. Maybe in the world to come, and it is somewhat supposition, but you could build and it won't be destroyed, which is an interesting thought. Certainly, if you take the care to build it right, some things are almost indestructible, right? Like, the pyramids have been there for a long time. A lot longer than some people think, I think. Let my offspring be rooted out. He said that. It's already happened to him, kind of. It's pretty rough. But he's saying, even so, if I have done this, then let it all come upon me, even though it has. But I'm denying that there's any cause. None of these things are staining me. If my heart had been deceived by a woman, or if I had laid wait at my neighbor's door, if some woman had tried to seduce me, or I was trying to seduce his wife, then let my wife grind to another, let others bow down upon her. That sounds, that grind to another I thought meant like kitchen work, grinding the meal and stuff. But the other one sounds to me like a little bit like let other men have my wife. It's pretty brutal, but again, he's saying the worst thing. Like if I've done this, then let all the worst things come upon me. Let me see here. I want to see what the NIV says about it. Oops. There we go. Then may my wife grind another man's grain. They want to make sure that let her grind another man's grain, and may other men sleep with her. Okay, there you go. I remember someone sometime a long time ago telling me like, oh yeah, people. He heard people talk about the part in the Bible where Jesus says 2 men will be in one bed, one will be taking the other left, and 2 women will be grinding at the mill. And they suggested it was sexual, or that the guys were gay and the women were gay. This is so ridiculously no. That's a modern conception of grinding. Okay, that's not what they would talk about like that. It's like let her do her wifely duties. The duties of a wife are to, on one hand, take care of the necessities of the home, and also to take care of her husband, to render due benevolence. And that's a mutual duty according to the New Testament, It's not just husband versus, it's not just for the husband, it's for the wife. For that would have been wicked, a sin to be judged. It's like, if that happened, well, then I guess I'd have it coming. I'd say, like, well, hey, then let all that happen to me because I done bad. I waited at my neighbor's door. I was seduced by a woman. There is a fire that consumeth to destruction and would root out all my increase. Yeah, if I followed after lust and these things, this would just ruin everything for me. I agree. All I built, and then allow some woman to seduce me and ruin it all? I don't think so. And that's the thing, is if I got ruined, then I have no one to complain to except myself. But Job hasn't done anything like that. And all his increase has been rooted out. So he's a little bit like, well, I didn't. Here's the thing, like it says, as Peter says, rejoice when men speak evil of you for doing well. Job has done well. If others want to say otherwise, they're just wrong. If I despise the cause of my manservant and my maidservant when they contend with me, what then do I do when God riseth up, when he visiteth? What shall I answer him? If I don't, they say a lot of times you should judge people by how they treat their inferiors or those they have charge over. Like if someone's a manager, how do they treat their employees? If someone's a parent, how do they treat their kids? If they're a teacher, how do they treat their students? You can tell a lot about someone by how they treat the people who are in their power. When they have power over people and they tend to run roughshod over them, it's usually a sign that they're not a very good person. Did not he that made me in the womb make him? Didn't he make me and the servant? Just because he's a servant doesn't mean he's not equally made by God. Did not one fashion us in the womb? So he knows that there's something, hey, I could ignore my manservants because I'm a great, important guy. I could do that, but it would be sin because he and I, before God, are really on the same footing, and I have to listen to his complaint. If I've withheld the poor from their desire, what they need, nothing in terms of just like, oh, we want to be rich. No, it's just like what they, the desire of the poor is things like, I want to eat, I need shelter, I need clothes. If I eat my morsel myself alone, my little part of life, the thing I got, and I just kept it all for myself. And then not giving it to those without fathers, the symbolic group of people who are bad off in society. Today we have a lot of fatherlessness, kids with no father in their life. And it is a disaster. We don't even treat it like one. We say, oh, having a single mom is just as good. I don't know how two people can do as good a job at anything except one. I mean, better than one. I don't know how one person can do a better job than two. Okay. Unless the two are inept. Two can be worse than one. Two terrible parents can be worse than one great one. Okay, fine. But the truth is, statistically, children that grow up without fathers do worse in every way. Okay, in every way. Growing up, even if they just have a single father. I mean, you take mom out of the way, they do better than kids with just a mom. Because dads provide a certain sort of thing that leads to better performance later in life. Whereas mothers are more about emotional security younger in life. And that carries, they establish it younger, but it kind of just holds through afterwards. It's not something you have to keep, when they become teenagers, mom's hugs and kisses become less and less necessary. From my youth, he was brought up with me, as with a father. And I've guided her from my mother. His manservant and maidservant were like, as with a father, as with a sister, they were brought up with him. They're like siblings or relatives. And whatever. I don't know why it's as with a father, but again, he may be saying I was like a father to him. If I've seen any parrot, I watch people die of exposure. That's pretty awful. Or any poor without covering. If I just seen that and not done anything about it. If his loins had not blessed me, his loins, his body, his loins, put for the fact that he's covered and is finally feeling good, and his body, the loins thereof, being pleased with and blessing him. Oh, thank you, feeling so thankful. You ever been cold and then suddenly get to the warmth and oh, it's so good to be warm. And he said, I made sure the people who were cold got warm. If I have lifted up my hand against the fatherless when I saw my help in the gate, what's that about? Oh, if I had, what they say is, the gate is a plate of judgment. So they said, if I have regarded the sun in its radiance, oh wait, no. What? Okay. Verse 21. If I have raised my hand against the fatherless, knowing that I had influence in court. There's a time, people do this. He's the richest guy in town. No one can touch him, and they pick on the weak. People don't have money to defend themselves. They use law against them, and then they have to settle because they have no choice. Okay. And when I saw my help in the gate, when I looked upon the fact that, hey, I got friends in high places. Then he said, let my arm, I think, fall off. He said, I'll be broken from the bone. Just break off my arm. For destruction from God was a terror to me. And by reason of his highness, I could not endure. I think he means, oh yeah, because they say, I like the way the NIV puts it, for I dreaded destruction from God. And for fear of his splendor, I could not do such things. That's the thing. I didn't want God to destroy me, so I didn't go near any of those things. Sorry. All right. If I made gold my hope, said to the fine gold, again, a lot of people, they put their faith in their money. Nothing wrong with using money and saving some up. But also remember to distribute to those who need it most. People are ready to perish. That does more to spread the gospel than, I think, a lot of other things. Confidence, okay. If I rejoice because my wealth was great and because my hand had gotten much, and I beheld the sun when it shined and the moon walking in brightness. What do he means by that? The NIV, I think, left it the same. He's talking about worshiping the sun and the moon and the stars. Let's see. I'm just feeling a little nauseous here. Yeah. My heart was secretly enticed, and my mouth had kissed my hand. Oh! They say offer them a kiss of homage. Okay. That's a little different, Sounded like patting himself on the back, but maybe this is what it means. But it says my hand. Maybe they got the Hebrew wrong. I don't know. Can't do that. If I rejoice at the destruction of him that hated me. Again, that's very New Testament. Bless them that curse you. And that's also in the Old Testament. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire upon his head. I mean, it's not the point of doing it. It's just saying, hey, don't worry about it. He's not going to be pleased. But you should do what's right. Neither have I suffered my mouth to sin by wishing a curse to a soul. I didn't, even then, I not only did I not, rejoice, but I didn't curse him either. I just let it happen. If the man of my tabernacle had said not, what? If those of my household had never said, who has not been filled with Job's meat? They're saying, everyone's got, who hasn't, he's saying everyone is, I've fed people. Everybody could say that. Strangers did not lodge in the street, but I opened my doors to the traveler. Kindness to strangers is considered a big deal. That's why the whole story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it's kind of all about that, about receiving strangers kindly, and not just like they're disposable. I mean, bring them in out that we may know them. And that makes me think of Sodom and Gomorrah, the stranger lodging in the street. That was considered a great sin. If I covered my transgressions as Adam, again, Adam covered with fig leaves, by hiding my iniquity in my bosom, I'm going to try to hide it away. Did I fear a great multitude, or the contempt of families terrify me that I kept silence and went not out the door? I was afraid of a crowd would come after me. Oh, that one would hear me. Behold, my desire is that the Almighty would answer me and that my adversary had written a book. I think that point is, if the one against me had written a book, I would put that on like a crown in my shoulder. I would just wear that on my, just right on my chest. Because it'd be like a badge of honor. Whatever that enemy has to say about me, I would not be afraid to make that's my crown. Because he's not afraid of the truth. I would declare unto him the number of my steps as a prince when I go near unto him. I think he's talking about the enemy. If my land cry against me, or that the furrows likewise thereof complain, again, it might be through overuse of the land. They were supposed to observe the Jubilee of the land also, or the Sabbath of the land, to let it rest every 7 years. Eating the fruits thereof without money, like stealing, I guess, without paying for it, or have caused the owners thereof to lose their life. To obtain someone else's, to cause them to die. Again, that's not murder. It's more like manslaughter, or it'd probably be murder. It's like planning them to lose their life. That's murder. But more planned out, it seems to me, when it says cause them to lose their life. Let thistles grow instead of wheat, and cockle instead of barley. The words of Joe Barron. Instead of usual things, bad things. He's just saying he's wishing all kinds of cursing upon himself if any of that's true, which we already know it isn't. So, we'll begin next week on chapter 32. I got to kind of run, so I'm just going to let this conclude a little early for today. I'm glad we got through it. I'm glad we got another study in, and we had quite a number this week, which is good. I'd like to get back on a fully regular schedule, but my schedule is still kind of crazy, even though I'm feeling like I'm not sure I can do this. Anyways, thanks for joining me. I look forward to being back again tomorrow or Monday. Remember, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, and he is the fulfillment of the law.
We wait for the light, but behold, obscurity for brightness, but we walk in darkness. We grope for the wall like the blind, and we grope as if we had no eyes. We stumble at noonday as in the night. We are in desolate places as dead men. We roar all like bears and mourn so like doves. We look for judgments, but there is none for salvation. But it is far off from us, for our transgressions are multiplied before thee, and our sins testify against us, for our transgressions are with us.